Another week down. And I'm doing this update at the very end of the first day of my following week. So I am going to be looking at my notes from last week and telling you all about it. For the most part, it was a pretty good week. It wasn't overly terrible. My Monday, I had Eatonton and Milledgeville, and then Statesboro times two drops in Statesboro. And we had a terrible storm the night before. And so I ended up leaving to try to get to I ended up leaving early because it was one of those that if I left at my normal time and I arrived at the yard by about 7 and started my shift at 7, then I was going to end up running into potentially some rain that was going to just get on me and while I'm doing my pre-trip and stuff. And I didn't want to have that happen. So if I showed up a little bit early, then it was going to be fun. And considering that it was just 4 stops and it was something like 400 miles, it was not going to be a big deal. It was just going to be me jumping on the interstate, or rather taking what used to be the GPS route I've come to find, back road, turning right on out of the DC and then turning left and then going down like 27 miles. And then you basically find yourself in on the road to Eatonton, right there in Madison. But the way the GPS now routes you is it tells you that it wants you to go turn left out of the DC, turn left onto 78, go down to 11, then go down 11 like 20 miles to the interstate, then turn left, go down 21 miles to that same exit. So it's actually longer now. It's another one of those things where, kind of like how I take 316 as opposed to 78, because it saves about, something like 6 to 8 miles and saves about 10 minutes. Is like 6 to 10 minutes depending on the time. Same kind of thing. It ends up being one of those things where the GPS now routes you on a longer path for whatever reason. I have no idea why. But who am I to question it, right? All of the stops that I did went fine. We had it was a bad storm the night before. I actually slept fairly peacefully. And by the time I got to the yard, there was a little bit of traffic and stuff getting there. But by the time I got there, I got off the yard by 6:40, which was fine. A little bit slower than normal. Normally I only take like 20 minutes or so to get off the yard after pre-trip and stuff. This time it took me a little bit longer. But anyway, all 4 stops went well. I got to each one of them. They let me right in. There was no issues at all. As a matter of fact, though, on my drive home, about the point that I got to Augusta, I started feeling kind of like a food poisoning was coming on. You know how kind of your stomach starts churning, it starts feeling a certain way, and your saliva starts getting overly thin, and you start kind of feeling like you need to swallow a lot, like constantly, back to back to back. That was the way it was. And I got back to the DC. I dropped off the trailer, post-tripped it, dropped off the truck, post-tripped it, did the macros on both of them. I got out of there. And by the time I got home, I got my stuff, got inside, and within 10 minutes, I was sick as a dog. I collapsed. I went to sleep. I slept almost 10 hours, barely got up just to go to the restroom or to drink some water, which was hard to keep down. But anyway, I won't go into a lot of this because it's just like, why. But slept overnight. The next day I got up again. I was off and on, but I was well rested at least because because I guess the food poisoning had me sleeping a lot. But I got up in the morning and came to find that I had Madison, Eatonton, Augusta, Martinez, and Evans. Then I had a second job going to Snellville. So that was a second load. I came in another hour early. I've been doing that. I've been setting my alarm now for 5 as opposed to 6 and trying to get to the office early, because if I have to do a second load, I would rather show up early to a Sam's Club or wherever that happens to be. If I can show up an hour early and my load is ready, then I can get there, sit there, make sure that I'm the first in line. Like right now, I'm sitting at a Sam's Club waiting. You'll hear about this next week, but I'm literally waiting here right now, and I'm the first in line. I got here right after 3 a.m. If I were to come in at my regular time, I'd get here probably right around 4 a.m. And that may mean that there's going to be somebody else in this parking lot that I'm going to have to wait until they offload. And that's going to drag out my day. So I'd prefer not to do that. Anyway, so it was the first time, like I got there, and it was the very first time I'd picked up a trailer that had 3/4 of a tank of fuel or more. So I took advantage, and because I had 5 stops and I had a second load after, I went ahead and left. There was a bit of a hassle because the trailer was still on the dock and the jockeys weren't around, so I had to wait until the yard jockeys got there to pull it out a few feet so that way I could actually pick it up. But once I got there, once I did that, and I was able to flag down a jockey and they pulled out the trailer for me. It was fine. It was good. I mean, I was able to very easily hook up, get out of there, and because I had 3/4 of a tank, you know how they want you to fuel up when you leave and fuel up when you come back. Well, most of the time, if I fuel up before, I kind of overly fill the reefer, so that way, usually when I come back, it barely has any fuel missing. It's still registering at full, if not slightly below full. So I don't almost ever refill it or fuel it up after, because I've done it before, and all I end up putting in is like a gallon, maybe a gallon and a half. So I don't even bother. Sometimes I'll even come back and I'll try to do it, and as soon as I pull the thing to try to fuel it, it stops. It kicks back. So I'm like, okay, well, if I fuel up before, I don't fuel up after. If I don't fuel up before, I will fuel up after. So anyway, that's the game plan. I did Eaton, I did Madison, they went fine. Eatonton, fine. Augusta. Holy crap, that Bobby Jones Augusta location is my nemesis. Problem is, if they see an ETA, they just don't bother watching out for the drivers. People need to watch for the drivers. Talking to a Walmart employee, what they told me is that when the ETAs are put in and the arrival is detected, what they do is it notifies the department that the truck has arrived. So if I'm delivering frozen dairy, it informs frozen dairy. The problem is, in the middle of the night, meat and produce is gone. Usually it ends up being somebody else that unloads me. So it ends up being one of those things where nobody's being notified. And Bobby Jones, that location, I can call them. No matter what number I hit, it just goes to their tree, and then nobody ever answers. So I end up having to run around. They don't check their cameras. There's no one waiting on the docks. I'll hear people moving around in there yelling or whatever else, but I guess they just don't have the key and they just don't bother informing anybody. So what ends up happening? I end up waiting, or I end up running around, which is like half a mile in that location anyway. Same thing happens every night. Every night I go there, it's the same thing. I'm sure it's the same thing for other drivers too. They need to get with it. They need to have a system, a doorbell or something that informs them when there's a driver out there. Because when we ring a doorbell and it just goes bzz, and there's nobody there, nobody is informed. And we drivers end up knocking on the door, banging on the door, whatever, forever. And people are inside, collapsing boxes and then throwing them in their compressor. But those people just do not care. It's not their, and the people that are loading in there, they don't care. They don't bother informing anybody. So anyway, it's annoying. Their pallet jack is also extremely slow. So anyway, I finally got an employee that I ended up banging on the door for a while. An employee finally came and opened it for me. And their pallet jack is so slow that he ends up basically going faster than the pallet jack, but it is just so slow, and he didn't have anybody running for him, so he ends up taking the meat slowly down the way. to put in the cooler. Luckily, once he did the 2 meat pallets, which I'm like going, oh man, this is like next level slow. After he does the 2 meat pallets, he ends up having mercy on me because the next ones were produce. So he ends up unloading the produce all to the dock. And by then, one person showed up to help run. So, and then that person, surprisingly enough, disappeared. They said, yeah, I'm here to help, and then disappears. So I didn't see that person again. But the guy helped me out. He says I'll unload to the dock because produce is not as critical as meat, because most of the produce, I guess, is sold on the floor at room temp. So he was just going to unload it there, and then once that was done, he was going to unload it, or he was going to run it. Anyway, as soon as I left that Bobby Jones, or actually right as I was arriving at Bobby Jones, it started raining. It was raining for my last 3 stops. Evans was my last stop. It had to wait 5 minutes per pallet when temping. It was one of those things where I don't know why, but they insisted on putting the thermometer in and then just letting it sit there and temp over and over and over and over and over again. And just after, and it was temping, but sometimes it was like, well, this isn't showing up right. And then once it got in there, they would sit there and wait for the pallet to temp. They wouldn't move out any of the others. And they would wait 5 minutes. And I'm watching, and the number's not dropping anymore. And so finally they ended up getting the temp that they were happy with, even though it was dropping after it hit 41. So normally what they look for is 41 degrees. And once it hits 41, they're like, okay, we're good. And they go ahead and stop it. But anyway, I got back to the DC just after 2, and I was first in line for the Snellville Sam's Club. So that was good. They let me in right at 4 a.m., which was good. And we unloaded 27 pallet positions, but I still didn't get out of there until 5:39 a.m. It was so long. They let me in right at 4, and I was so optimistic. And the fact that it takes an hour and 40 minutes to unload 27 pallet positions just shows how slow these Sam's Clubs are, which is why I'm not looking forward to here. This Sam's Club that I'm currently at right now is the slowest Sam's Club I've ever encountered. It's terrible. Anyway, more about that one next week. Wednesday, I went to Taylor's, Greenville, and Traveler's Rest. Not a very bad day. Annoying pumps, the fuel pumps at the Walmart DC, same thing. There was a fleet driver they always like to take the same pump that we always take, but the fleet drivers, they just take their sweet time. They just go so slow. I don't know if a fleet driver only has 1 load to do a day, but they sure don't seem to act like they have 2 like we do, because they just sit there and they slowly pump up, and then they'll walk around the trailer, and I'm like, if you're going to inspect it someplace else, because they'll just walk around, they'll look at different things, and then they'll slowly, casually walk someplace and then come back, and just, gosh, they take forever. And I understand taking your time when you are on the road, not rushing, not blasting through red lights, not speeding, that kind of stuff. But man, when you're at a fuel island and you're just sitting there, and you pull up there and you don't get out. And then finally, when you get out, you slowly walk over and you open up the thing and you get your gloves out and you slowly put them on, and it's so annoying watching and waiting. Anyway, there was another guy behind him, another semi that pulled out, and I couldn't, because of that semi, I could not pull back into the other lane, the one that requires you to take off the pump on the right hand side and then run around to the left and see if it's going to go, because it's supposed to be, it connects up to the sensor and then it's supposed to unlock the pump, but it doesn't always. So anyway, it's annoying. But he kept me from getting into my lane, so it took like 15 minutes for me to get through there, which is annoying because I would have gone to that other pump and been fine. There was and as if there wasn't enough of a trouble, there was traffic on 85 North due to a crash. And then there was, and then as I was driving, I jumped, my heart jumped in my chest because I noticed that the way station going southbound was open. It's never the case at this time of night, but luckily northbound it was going fine. I don't think it would have been a problem. I was only carrying 39,000 pounds, but that particular day, normally when I go out of state, I end up using the Catskills over there at the Walmart DC. That particular day, I forgot. And I wasn't thinking about it because I was so delayed at the fuel island. I'm like, let's go. Just getting out of there. And I didn't think about it. And then anyway, as soon as I got to South Carolina, there was road construction. So that delayed me. That's new. That road construction was new. And I don't know what they were doing, but they just collapsed everybody into one lane. It didn't look like they were doing anything. And they were actually picking up the cones as I was leaving, as I was passing them. So I don't know what the delay was there, but whatever it was, it was crazy. Stop one went fine. The first stop on my list, Taylor's, it went fine. When I got to Greenville, it was that neighborhood market, and they weren't ready. It was just before 10 o'clock. I arrived before third shift arrived. And apparently if you get there before 10, they just do not have the ability to unload you. Because people, I guess they can only unload you if it's after 10. Or at least that's what they told me. They said, well, guys don't come in until after 10. So I got there at 9:40 and I'm just waiting. And they're like, yeah, you're going to be waiting for a few minutes. They'll come in and we'll start unloading you at 10. I'm like, okay. Well, they had a team of people that came in. And then at 10, they called a meeting. The manager there called a meeting. And so he's over there talking to his team for 10 minutes. Then they had to grab their pallets and they had to start shuffling around pallets and moving them out of the coolers and stuff like that. It took them 40 minutes before they started to unload me. And so I was like at wit's end at that point, because all I'm trying to do is finish my very ambitious day. So that way I can hopefully, find out if I had a second load. Because if you end up getting there too late for a second load, then you're done. Anyway, got to my Travelers Rest Super Center and they were ready. And so they had the door open and the runners were ready when I arrived. They were ready to go. Got there, door was open, got inside. The door to my trailer was open. They had runners standing by. They were ready. So they made up for the other location. I arrived back at the DC at 1:30 a.m. and they did not have a second load for me. They said, everybody is confirmed. Everybody is good. Sorry, we don't have a second load for you, but you're good to go. So I was out of there at 2:05 a.m. And that was, I'm sorry, I take that back. That was not the day that happened. I had a second load. And it was Duluth Sam's Club. I got out of the DC by 2:05 a.m. That's what it was. And I got to that Duluth Sam's Club at 3 and they let me in right at 4 a.m. I started unloading immediately and they didn't waste time. I was out of there by 4:50. If all Sam's Clubs were that fast, I'd have no problem doing them. But being that Sam's Clubs are typically extremely slow because they have a cooler that's on the other side of the building and they have to run every single pallet over there. They never tag team. It's always one person is assigned to unload a trailer and that's it. That's annoying. The left rear outside drive tire was losing air that particular day. I started my day when I was doing my inspection. I'm like, you sound a little low. So I put some air in it. And then when I went out and did my whole day and then I came back, it sounded low again. So, because when you put air in and then you hit it, it makes a different resonance. And then when I came back at the end of the day, it sounded low. So at this point, I called roadside repair because I went into the to the office and they said, yeah, you'll need to call roadside repair. And so I said, okay. I called roadside repair and the lady that answered gave me attitude. She said, roadside repair. And I said, hi there. I have a tire that is losing air. And she said, okay, you need to, where are you located? I said, Monroe. And she says, can you get it to the left? I said, no, because at that point I was at my 13th hour. So I said, no, I can't. And she says, of course. She's like, of course you can't. Sarcastic and bitter. Like, of course you can't do that. And so I was like, okay. And then she's like, you drivers, you're on the Walmart account. I said, yeah. She said, if you can't go by and get these things, get tires and stuff serviced, they should not allow you to park there. They should make you park at a terminal. That way they can do the repair there, because every one of these service calls costs $600 to the company. And I'm like, well, the terminals are usually overloaded. She said, no, you don't understand. We used to have a terminal there at the Walmart DC. We don't do repairs there anymore. They need to not let you park there if they're not going to do repairs. You need to just park there at the location, at the terminal that is there in Atlanta. And I said, the one that's about 45 minutes to an hour away from the Walmart terminal. She says, if that's what it takes, yes, because it needs to save money. I'm like, well, that's not a good idea, because then we would have to load up every single day. We would have to do our inspections. Then we'd have to drive an hour to pick up our trailer. At the end of the day, we'd have to drive an hour back. So that's not a good idea, because we wouldn't be able to do 2 loads in an average day. We'd only be able to do 1. And she's like, well, they need to open up that terminal over there. I said, you get no complaints from me there. And she's like, well, so in the meantime, I'm gonna tell the guy to come out there and fix your tire. I'm like, thank you. She's giving me attitude. Anyway, so she said, she's like, so I got your number and she tells me my number, and I'm like, yep. And she said, all right, I'll have the driver call you in a few minutes. You're gonna be there, right? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And she's like, and why not? And I'm like, because it's the end of my shift. I go home every day. So I'm on my way home right now. But the truck is still there, and he only has to do an external repair, an exterior repair on the truck. And then the DC office is right next to where I parked the truck. So you can go in if he needs a signature, and I can tell him that when he calls. And she says, okay. And then hangs up on me. I'm like, jeez, what attitude. The guy ended up calling about 20 minutes later. He was nice. He's like, hey, what you doing driving over things? I'm like, hey, just trying to keep you employed, man. He's like, huh. All right, well, he's like, I'm leaving from Athens. I'll be there in about 45 minutes. I'm like, cool. Anyway, he calls me when he arrives. I can't find the truck, even though I told him exactly where it was. He finds it, and then I tell him I'm not there. I end up having to leave, but I said the DC, the office, which is right behind. He says, yeah, I've been in there before. So I said, all right, cool. You good? He said, yep, I'm good. Thanks. And then that was it. Simple. No big deal. So the attitude was just, who knows why. Anyway, the next day, Thursday, my Thursday was an actual Thursday. I had Swanee and Cumming ×2, going to 2 different Cumming stores. It was another early day. And so I logged in just before 6, and it was a frozen dairy run. So I arrived at Swanee 3 minutes. Actually, I'm sorry. I take that back. I was meat and produce, but I arrived in Swanee 3 minutes before frozen and dairy arrived. 3 minutes before. So by the time I got in there, got them going and stuff, they were ready to move. So as I was getting out of the truck and running to the door, which I do run because, cardio, there was a trailer that was pulling up. And so when he came in, he says, why were you running? You were making sure that you got in front of me? I said, no, I always run to the door. Anyway, he was like, okay. Anyway, I was done in less than 20 minutes and he was unloading. So not a big deal. The Cumming store had just gone to lunch, but 2 guys were wrangling to help me out. Slow pallet jack, though. The guy that unloaded me didn't speak very good English. This is the second location. I mean, the Swanee went fine. The first Cumming location, he didn't speak English. And he told me it was also his first day. I don't know how he was certified to drive an electric forklift on the first day, but he seemed to have an understanding of it. Maybe it was his first day from a different location or something like that, because he seemed to have an understanding, but he did not speak very good English. I collected stickers for him. I had never been to that location before, but anyway, that was fun. He was fine. It just took me a little while to get in the door, and then find people because they were at lunch. The second Cumming location, unloader got a bit distracted. It was only slightly slower than normal. Wasn't too bad. Then I ended up having that was a pretty quick load. So I think I was back there within like 4 hours, 4.5, something like that. And so I loaded up. I was going to Dawsonville, Dahlonega, and Cleveland next, which was only about 170 miles. And couldn't find the trailer. Could not find the trailer at all. It was crazy. So I ended up finding one of the jockeys and asking him, and he ended up pointing me to where it was. It was way down farther. Normally, when you first pick up a trailer, if it's not at the dock, and they just need to pull out about 10 feet or something like that, it's usually somewhere closer towards one of the first yard. It's either parked on the right, which is very seldom for me, or it's parked on the other side in kind of parallel to the entrance. If it's not there, then it's farther around the corner of the building. But it's very, very seldom, if ever, almost never going to be past that. And I had not seen one there for months, so I wasn't thinking about that. Well, the jockey ends up pointing it out that it's way down there. So I'm like, okay, great. So anyway, I picked it up, and then I needed to get some fuel. So I ended up going to the Brazelton, because it was on the way to the Dawsonville location. I ended up going to the Brazelton pilot, and they had some issues there. They were having issues with guys parking in the fuel island, and then two guys had run inside to take a shower. Luckily, not my lane, even though the guy that was driving was just a box truck. And I'm waiting there 5 minutes. I'm not seeing him fuel up or anything. There's no pump out, or he's not even fueling. The pump's not even in the truck. So I'm like wondering what's going on. I go inside and start asking if anybody's using that truck. Nobody comes out, but there's another guy that was like, yeah, there's this guy here, he's just totally left. So I was on pump 20, the other pump was on 19. Those are the ones that could not find, the most recent ones. They said, yeah. And the person at the office said, yeah, we've had a problem with in the past 30 minutes people have been going in and taking a shower and leaving their trucks at the fuel islands. I'm like, great. So by the time I got up there was a guy that was inside just grabbing snacks and just comes out looking at his phone. I'm like, is this you? And he's like, so he loads up and takes his sweet time to get out of there. I had already gone into the app and started up the process to start the mobile fueling. So I was done and out of there. There was another Martin truck. He was one of the guys that was inside, just that they couldn't find from pump 19. He ends up pulling out in front of me, but he stops. I pull up behind him, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Ends up being that there was a wrecker around the corner, because there you pull out of the fuel island, then you have to go down the left, and then you drive all the way out through the parking lot again, and then you end up driving to the street and then turn left. But there was a wrecker over there futzing around with a truck, and so it was barricading everything. One of the pilot employees was out there, and he told me, I said, what's the holdup? And he said, oh, there's a wrecker over there and stuff. And I said, and I look, and there's no truck behind where I was in that fuel line. So I said, hey, got a question for you. And he says, you want to see if I can spot you on the backup? I'm like, would you? He says, yep, let's get you out of here. I'm like, thank you. So I backed straight up backwards through the fuel island. I had started to make that turn, but I made I went straight out, backed up through there. He was watching me, and then I made a back left turn and then got straight out of there. So I was the only person that was able to escape that whole situation, because everything else was chaos over there, with trucks like ready to go and waiting for another truck to get out of their way or whatever. Dawsonville was on the slow side of average, but it was fine. I arrived at Dahlonega just a minute before 2 a.m. and they were ready to go. They did not go to lunch at 2, which is great as far as I'm concerned. Cleveland was organized, and it was they were also very fast. And so I got back to the DC, and I was out by 5 a.m. Everything was fine. My Friday, I ended up getting assigned a 400-mile job to LJ and then to Greenwood. Now, that is the zip code to zip code way that it puts it in like 96 miles to LJ, 96 miles back, and 102 or 103 miles to Greenwood. The thing is, though, LJ, the way the GPS always routes you, is closer to 146 miles. So it would have been a 500 and some odd mile day for me. This was going to be the 5th day in a row that week that I had gone in early and arrived and started my day at 6 as opposed to 7, which is starting to become the new norm for me. I got there I was approaching the office rather, and I got a phone call saying, "Hey, how soon are you going to be here?" I'm like, "I'm on my way in now." And they're like, "Okay, we're looking at changing your loads." I'm like, changing your load. I'm like, if you can avoid that, I'd really appreciate it, because this is a great load for me. He says, "I understand. We'll see what happens." I'm like, okay. I'm knowing that they're going to change it. Anyway, I get to the office, and they said, yes, they are going to need me to change load. So load wasn't going to be late. It was going to be a frozen dairy. And I was like, okay. And then the fleet manager was in. So he says, "Hey, send him back." And I'm like thinking I'm going to get chewed out for saying like, "Oh no, I didn't want you to change me, but oh well." Ends up being that that's not what he was saying at all. He was actually going to have my back on that. He was like, "I know you ended up we're going to have to change your load, and you're helping us out on this." So he was like, "So what I'm prepared to do is to cover. You have this first load, and then whatever your second load is, I'll compensate you for the difference of the miles, because this was a good load, but you're helping us out." I'm like, "All right, well, that's very generous. Thank you so much." I had also called the fleet manager last week, and he never called me back, because I was going to ask a couple payroll things. Ends up being that I was concerned that I wasn't getting paid my load bonuses correctly. Ends up being that that our pay week is Wednesday morning till Friday at midnight. I'm sorry, Tuesday at midnight. So it's still Wednesday at midnight to the following Tuesday at midnight. But it counts the loads from Sunday till Saturday. So if I do 10 loads, I'll get the load bonus pay for doing whatever, for 10 loads, it's $200. If I did 11 in that time, then it would be $300. That's the reason why my load bonuses have not been going through, because the company doesn't look at it as a calendar week or the pay week. They look at it as the calendar week of Sunday through Saturday. So that's a bit annoying, but hey, is what it is. So anyway, I also had contacted in the previous week and told them that if they need someone to do ride-alongs with new drivers, consider me. I'm available. I was willing to offer that, because I know that they're most likely, if they do that, there's a good possibility that I get a shorter load first, because they're not going to want that other driver to go out for a super long run if there's a shorter run. So I'm hoping that if I ever do those, I could get out on a shorter run first. Then I would get back, and they wouldn't send me out to a neighborhood market or a Sam's Club that's a 4 a.m. store, because I would then be sitting around waiting 4 hours for a load. So they're most likely going to send me out for something better, which is the way I prefer it to be, a shorter load first. So I was offering myself as a bit to help out, but also as a position play for me. So manager said, "I have no problem in the world signing up to do ride-alongs. As a matter of fact, I'd consider you for the mentor program." I'm like, let's do baby steps on that. Don't know if I'd want to jump into the mentor program yet. First of all, I'm not on platform science. He said, "Well, we would get you into a new truck group, and we would get you trained on that." I'm like, let's do baby steps. I'm liking the trucks that I'm in right now and the system and stuff, because I've had one truck that's in the next group up that drove me crazy with all the beeping, and then the other truck was more normal. If I ended up getting in a new truck group that was beeping at me constantly, I would go crazy. It would literally be one of those things I'd want to quit the company, because it would drive me crazy. But anyway, so I got to Cleveland. They were organized as always. Got out of there real quick. And Cornelia was the same kind of thing. No big deal. So I got back to the DC just after 11 p.m. And my second load was Seneca and Clemson, which is only like 170 miles. So they put me on this even though it was only at 23% filled. And they could have just cut me early and sent me home, but then they said, "We'd like to send you out on this. Are you okay waiting?" I'm like, "Sure, I'm not doing anything. Might as well." It'd be a second load, and I know that my next week, this was my working 5 days, home for 3 days, which puts all 3 of those days in one pay period, which means I'm only going to get paid for 4 days. So one of those days would be a second load if I got it. So I said, yes, but I'll wait for it. Let's give me that second load. So that was a Seneca and Clemson. So I ended up waiting there. I got to the DC just after 11 p.m. and I got out of the DC. It was like an hour and change later. But I got to, the trailer wasn't ready until 12:15. I got there just after 11. Had a jockey pull it out, and it was, and it was another occasion where I only had where I had 3/4 of a tank of fuel. So I was out of there. I got out of there real quick as I could, because I'd already been waiting there for over an hour and 15 minutes at that point. And by the time I found a jockey and he pulled out the trailer, I was ready to go. I arrived at Seneca at 1:54 a.m. But the GPS routed me onto the wrong side of the building, so it was tough to get around it. It ends up being that it told me arrived at your location, which is almost always at the truck entrance. So I pulled in there, and it didn't have a no truck sign until that hard corner. And then I saw the no truck sign, and I was like, you know what? Most of the time I see those signs, I can still get around it. And I'm like, you know what? Even though it's going to be a blind side back, I'll see if I can make the turn. If not, then I'll back up. I'm approaching 2 a.m. though, and I'm like, oh, come on. Hopefully I can get through there. I end up going tight to the corner, going sharp, and I'm like, yikes. I'm going to end up hitting one of those yellow concrete pillars that sticks up. I'm like, yikes, that sucks. Okay, fine. So I end up saying, okay, I guess I'm at the mercy of this. So I end up looking at it. I get out and look, and it looks like if I could just get over a little bit, maybe pull the trailer back a little bit more, then I can make it, because it was pretty close. So I said, okay. So, and as make the turn, I went ahead and backed straight up towards it, and then sucked over a little bit more and slowly pulled forward. I kept jumping over and looking at it out the window over there, and I would go forward about 5 feet, and then I'd look at it again, 5 feet, move again, and I ended up missing it by not that much, but it's like by a hair. So it was, in reality, it was closer to a foot. But I wasn't about to let it, and because the tandems were all the way forward, it allowed maximum pivot on the rear of the trailer. So it was fine. I got out of there I got as snug over as I could. There was a sign. I barely got past it. But anyway, that took me about 10 minutes to safely navigate it. So by the time I was backed into the trailer into the dock, it was 2:15, and I was like, great, they're going to be at lunch. But it ends up being that it ended up being fine. They were ready for me. About 3/4 of the truck went to that location there in Seneca, and here's what was kind of weird. There were pallets with no stickers on it. It had one store number for the second store on there, but we ended up having a total of 6 stickers missing off a pallet. 6 pallets did not have stickers on there. If I remember correctly, there was 19 total pallet positions, and 6 stickers were missing. So that was a bit annoying, because what I ended up doing is there were stickers for the second location. So I ended up, as we pulled them all off, I said, we're going to need to check every single pallet on this trailer just to make sure we give you yours. So I ended up going through and looking at the load map and double checking all the stickers for the second location to verify that we had them all before I was going to leave that location. So once I was confident that we were going to give them everything of theirs, the one sticker, there was not a sticker, but it was a handwritten note that said the store number, and it was placed on the top of one pallet. But that was the only indicator that I had that was going to the second store. But based on the numbers, the second store would have had all their pallets. And if I did not give that one to the second store, which would have been an overage, and it's like, why would they get it? If I gave that one to the first store, this first store would be complete on all their pallets. So I said, you know what? I'm collecting stickers, and there were a lot of stickers missing. And so I said, you know what? I believe this is yours. because it was also not all the way back. If it was all the way back towards all the other ones, I would question whether or not it was. I would second guess it and say, you know what, I might take it to the second location, even though it didn't match their stickers. Even though I would in my gut tell me is the first location. So ultimately, I would be telling myself to take it to the second location because of the sticker, but I wouldn't. I would still leave it at the first. So that was the way it was going to be. I was going to end up leaving it at the first location, and I did. And that way they had all the stickers that matched the number of pallets they were supposed to be receiving. And so by process of elimination, basically I got that second location, all the stickers, and they were none the wiser. They were just like, oh yeah, we got all of our stickers. Yep, we're good. Okay, awesome. But anyway, it took it over an hour to figure out all the pallet crap because the loaders at the Walmart DC didn't load it correctly. They didn't put stickers on things. So it took over an hour for me to get out of there. Anyway, got to, she was a nice lady. The lady that was kind of heading it up. She was a bit scatterbrained though. And, he was crazy with the pallet jack. Kept crashing pallets into stuff and kept commenting that she wasn't confident with her pallet abilities and she couldn't find the right key for the pallet jack, couldn't find the right key to unload the dock, and couldn't find the right key to let me out. And at the end of the day, because I ended up having to run around that building. So, it was kind of crazy. I was literally about to run out the door when she ended up coming back with the right key. And so anyway, the last location was a Clemson neighborhood market. That Clemson that's pitch dark in the pitch black in the loading dock area. They don't have any lights anywhere near it, so it's pitch dark. And I end up having to back up, but gently touching the brake so that way the brake light comes on, and that's the only light I can see going out there. And because it's pitch dark, it's not like I have any light pollution. That's like out there trying to prevent me from seeing where I'm going. It's dark. So my brake lights coming on allow me to illuminate. So anyway, I got in there. My favorite guy is working there. He's a little slower, a little on the slow side. He's an older fella, very nice guy. And he's got a really good work ethic. So I like him. Get in there, knocked on the door for a few minutes. He was up in the front, but he heard me. So he came over and he let me in. He starts by making a photocopy of everything. And then I put all the stickers on that photocopy, and he gets me out of there. And all was well. Wasn't a bad week at all. And because we're now past payday, ends up being that I ended up getting a pretty decent paycheck too. Part of that's also because I ended up having 2 days off, not 3 days off. So that ended up meaning that I got more jobs that were going on this paycheck. So anyway, that's the latest. No real updates or anything aside from that. But that's it. Thanks for watching.